It's time for All Hands on Tech.
Climb on board as we explore all the amazing things happening in Nova Scotia's tech sector. Each episode, we'll chat with local experts to uncover the secrets of what makes Nova Scotia the best place for collaboration, innovation, and creativity.
All Hands on Tech is proudly produced by Digital Nova Scotia, the industry association for Nova Scotia's growing tech sector.
Welcome back to All Hands on Tech. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ashley. Today we're diving into the world of payments and banking software with a company that's been at the forefront of innovation for more than 3 decades. Matera is a proven technology leader in Latin America, pioneering numerous payment technologies such as QR-initiated payments and banking systems.
Joining us on the podcast today to talk about the future of finance, instant payments, and the transformative power of QR codes is Thierry Battistini. He's the general manager at Matera Canada and a key player in driving Matera's expansion into new markets, such as ours, and continue its legacy of innovation. So without further ado, welcome to All Hands on Tech.
Bonjour.
Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, at the, in the intro there, we talked about Matera being a leading company in Latin America. So it might be kind of a new name to folks here in Halifax, or Nova Scotia, I should say. So just maybe let's start there. Tell us about Matera and what exactly you guys do.
Okay. So Matera was originally founded in a city close to São Paulo, Brazil, the economical capital of Brazil, almost 40 years ago. Nowadays, 2 of the 3 top U.S. banks, actually 2 of the 3 biggest banks in the world, 3 of the top 10 U.S. banks, and a third of the banks in Brazil use Matera software. In 2019, Matera already opened the company here in Canada to be a delivery hub and a research and development hub. But because the instant payment scheme, it's called PIX in Brazil, was so successful, and because COVID hit, they actually opened the company and it was empty. They didn't hire anyone. And recently, when we started, Matera has been growing a lot in the US. And when we started selling the solutions here, we gained so much traction so quickly that the company decided, hey, that's time to retake the project. So we are currently hiring.
Okay, that's very exciting.
Oh yeah, a lot of people will be happy to hear that. Very cool. What are some of the roles you're hiring for?
Mainly 3 roles, technical writers, software developers, and senior architect, because we don't actually deliver the solutions in the client, so we typically partner with huge companies. And so the people who work with us, they will be helping and supporting the big integrators to install our solutions within the clients. So it's really, if you take the technical writers aside, those are typically really senior people who are either really good at what they do on the technical side, or they know very well the payment subject.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we learned a little bit more about what you do, but I'm interested to learn more about kind of the slogan that's on your website, which is Banking Software of Tomorrow. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Okay, so again, I'm going to take an example which is very simple, the instant payment scheme. So Matera has been working on QR code enable payment for a long time, way before Brazil started its instant payment scheme, like the official one. So much so that when the central bank actually called upon Matera to participate, most of the IP around the QR code, which is an essential piece of the user experience in Brazil, it came from the IP of Matera. So that's a good example of the company anticipated a need and a market trend, developed a solution, created IP for that, and when the market was ready, when the regulator was ready, we were the one who were chosen.
Cool.
Yeah.
Innovation.
Yeah, can you walk us through how that payment looks like? Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I've used a QR code instant payment before. before. So can you just walk me through like what it looks like from a user perspective?
Yeah, of course. So currently in the world, there are not many countries where the QR code is actually used for, I would say, a full-fledged instant payment. Mainly it's Brazil, India, and China.
Okay.
So how does it work? A lot of people know QR codes since COVID because, half of the restaurants in North America, when COVID hit, you would have a QR code on your menu. And but most of people tend to associate QR code with a redirect. So, for example, if you go in some restaurants, there are some solutions out there where you're gonna scan the QR code, you're gonna go to a landing page and you put your information, your card information and whatnot, which is actually kind of risky, right? All of this appeared after, if I'm not mistaken, 2017, when Apple actually started to implement the QR code recognition on a cell phone camera, right? The QR code I'm talking about, it's much more secure. I'm going to describe the user experience in Brazil right now. So you go to let's say a pharmacy. At the end of the attendant scans your stuff. At the end, you see a QR code on the screen. You just pull up your phone, and automatically your phone is going to recognize it's a PIX or instant payment QR code. It's going to drive you to your banking app. And so you have to authenticate, of course. And once you have authenticated, this QR code actually carries a standard called EMV, so MasterCard, Visa, Amex. So it's not something that's not, aligned with market standards. And among the information are all the information you need, your bank app need to know who you're paying to, how much you're paying. And so you are in an authenticated environment, which is very different, right? And so we also call that going from a pull to a push payment mode. And the user experience as described is what the market would call a merchant present mode. The merchant is presenting you with the QR code that you're supposed to pay. And so you click confirm, but this can happen on your bills also. So if you get your Nova Scotia Power bill, it could come with a QR code, and you would take your phone, just scan the QR, authenticate yourself with facial recognition, for example, in your bank app. You just check the value, and you click confirm, and that's it. So that can make the user experience much easier if you go, for example, pay for something for your car, you license your car again. And normally you have to put a lot of information of your car and authenticate in a government website and whatnot. And with QR code, you can carry not only the payment information, the basic information, you can carry a lot of information. This is extremely nice for the merchant. They can do a lot of analysis afterward, but in terms of the user experience, it's really way better. So North America is, specialists would say, around 5 years behind what Brazil, China, and India are right now. But the US has FedNow, right? They have a payment tray now. And so the inflection point is going to happen sooner or later. In Canada, we still don't know when we're going to have that. Everybody is waiting for the government to publish the budget in April 16, if I'm not mistaken, around open banking, instant payment. So let's see where it goes. But the reality is that the merchants, everybody is already super eager to go away from interchange fees, right?
Can I ask one question?
Yes,
just in terms of how, because I'm just curious. So, like, we went to a restaurant today. Would it be like you could print the QR code on a bill and then put it on the table, and then I could just scan it and pay? Like, there's no need for the debit machine? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. See that?
You can print it, or you can even put on the POS.
Right.
Right? And you scan the screen of the POS, and that's it. So, and for the merchant,
well, that's what I mean. It's a big time saver.
The advantage is not only the time saved, it's you don't go, because most of the time if you use this approach, you're using a pay by bank payment. So you're not using a credit card. I mean, you can, If you're using a wallet where in your wallet, let's say you have debit card, credit card, your bank account, you can choose. But most of the time, this approach tends to be used for a pay by bank. And I'm going to give you a number from Brazil. In Brazil, an instant payment costs 0.22% of the transaction. A debit transaction is 1%, so it's 5 times more. A credit transaction, it's around 2%, sometimes more. Like a Stripe transaction, it's 2.5, 2.7. So it's a lot of money for the merchants. And so in Brazil right now, we are at 5 billion transactions per month, and it's more than debit and credit card together.
Wow.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So you say that you're waiting on the budget announcements to make some decisions or to kind of know what to do, kind of moving forward in Canada. But do you have a goal? Like, if everything goes to plan, like what would that look like? What would growth in Canada look like?
So Canadian market is a very interesting point in our opinion, because we still don't have a date for what you call a payment trail. So the payment trail, to make it simple, it's really the basic infrastructure where the messages from payments go through. And we are currently waiting for a date for the instant payment trail in Canada. Because of that, we have a lot of players, especially merchants, but also credit unions, which are interested to try and move toward that, even if they cannot implement everything. So you can use part of our technology to create what we call a closed loop. What is a closed loop? An example, if you go to pay your coffee in the morning, and the coffee shop where you buy your coffee has an account in the same bank as you have an account as a client. Using our technology, you can enable a closed loop, so your money is going from your account in this bank to your coffee shop account in this bank. So it's a real pay by bank process.
Wow.
You skip all the credit card.
Wow, yeah.
So you still don't have a national standard, but you can move toward and have, some big merchants, they can't take this step because they are so big that as big companies, they tend to have accounts in all the big banks, and their clients tend, to be spread out everywhere. So there are several use cases, government for public transportation, for example, or credit unions among themselves, right? Create a closed loop among themselves. And with some local merchants in a community, and you start moving away from interchange fees. And we're talking a lot about, day-to-day like restaurant, but for small companies, that has a huge impact. The last figure I remember is that in US and Canada, more or less 40% of the liquidity is stuck in transit. So if you're a small entrepreneur, that's a lot of money that you're waiting to receive, right? And you could be receiving it like immediately, right? So you could say, hey, we have Interact. Interact is not an account-to-account payment. Your money actually goes to Interact, and Interact has a pool of money and transfer it, right?
So it sounds like there is quite an appetite, especially from the merchant perspective, because of that cost saving. But I'm just curious, because obviously here in Canada, there's still cards. A lot of people use cards. Digital wallets are really catching on. So I'm just wondering, in terms of adoption from the consumer perspective, do you think that's going to be challenging, or what will that look like?
Yeah, so people love their reward points, right? The problem is, if you look at the balance sheet of most of the big banks and some of the big merchants, they currently have a huge liability problem in their balance sheet because people are not spending those points. So the same mechanism that was invented to drive credit card use and everything, it's starting to collapse on itself.
Who's not using their points? I'm using them.
A lot of people
Even me.
are not. Yeah, if you look at the balance sheet of the big banks and the big planes like airplane and so a lot of those guys are actually trying to transform this into wallets. But for wallets to be interoperable, you need to move forward to have an actual instant payment scheme, right? So that's a company side. And you asked me about how do we change client behavior, right?
Right.
And basically it's going to be about discounts, right? And other systems of reward, but discounts. So when you start having discounts for paying with an instant payment instead of credit card, people start thinking twice. Again, a lot of people ask me, what are you guys doing so differently? Where first we are years ahead, so we know how to handle huge volumes. But most importantly, because we lived this experience in Brazil, we know how the behavior of the people tend to shift and everything, and that's where we think we have an advantage. And that comes to your point, how do you change the behavior? Discounts and incentives are crucial, of course, and the other side is the user experience. It's so much simpler when you start implementing this kind of approach that people just go for it naturally, The other day somebody described me, it's not a Brazilian example, but an example in India where, people buying popcorn in the street and just doing the same that we do in Brazil, like just scanning a QR code and paying and so quickly, and the vendor on his side had a speaker saying, "Hey, the money is already in your account."
Wow. I didn't know Brazil was such
Fintech, like
a
hub.
trend, a
Yeah.
trendsetter, like leading the charge.
I used to work at BMO in Toronto 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I moved from Toronto to Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I was a specialist in money laundering and international money transfers. That's how I ended up working at BMO. When I arrived in Brazil in 2002, those guys were already 10 years ahead from anything I've ever seen. And I had worked in several countries in banks.
Wow.
That's not by accident that open banking is running like fully in Brazil right now. Instant payment, it's because they had hyperinflation in the 90s, and because of that they created such well organized banking scheme, extremely well regulated, that now they are reaping all this change. I was part of the first fintech in Brazil.
Wow.
The very first fintech.
Wow. You should have led with that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's called Geru in Japanese. It means money. It means cash. When we started, we were the first company to lend 100% online, unsecured loan.
Wow.
There was no law for that. So we built the company, we went to the central bank, and we said, hey, here we are. Like, we had landed in the States already. So we didn't invent the concept, right? But we were like, and we went to the central bank and they sat with us and they were really open. Of course, they created a strong regulatory framework, but they moved very swiftly. And a few years after that, they came back to us and say, hey, we want to launch open banking. But the big banks are always crying and saying, it's going to cost too much for us. We already have our APIs. They didn't have any APIs, and so they ask us, how do you create, let's be pragmatic, how do we create open banking to take all those arguments off the table? And we did that. We just built the thing and we just showed everybody, and they used the work that this great guy from Price did here in Canada. His name is Abraham. They used our software in Brazil to do that, to do the public consultation. So again, it's no wonder that instant payment is so advanced now, because the financial system in Brazil is extremely advanced, and most of the time people don't have a clue, That's normal. That's common.
No, it's really interesting.
But we are years ahead. And that's why Matera, at some point, Fed in the US actually called upon Matera to be part of the discussions for the Fed now. They called upon the central bank, the Brazilian central bank. At some point, the Canadian central bank was also looking at some source code from Brazil to make some things happen. So it's really advanced.
It's very impressive.
That is impressive.
I am just curious. I do want to backtrack a little. You talked about your growth in Canada. But in 2022, you went into the U.S. market, and often kind of Canada follows, what happens south of the border. So I'm just curious how expansion into that market has gone for Matera.
So in the US, it's been staggering. Again, it's a different context because FedNow is now reality. So you have the basic infrastructure, it's ready. A lot of people are not using it. And not because of the customer behavior, but because of what we call what Matera, the airplane and airport effect. So what the US did was discuss a lot about, let's have good airplanes, let's transport money very fast, but they didn't talk about the airport. And the airport is like the user experience. So they now have a very good infrastructure, but they don't have the last mile solution and this QR code experience, for example, to drive the adoption. And there is another factor that I have not mentioned. It's more technical, but we are here talking about technology. You have all the banking institutions in North America, they use very old core banking systems. And when you talk about processing instant payment, you're talking about being able to approve a payment instantly 24/7. Most of the core banking cannot handle that. We had to solve that in Brazil. And we have one of the solutions we market. It's called a digital twin. It's a light ledger. Enable companies to do that. And a lot of people are completely focused on, hey, let's make instant payment happen. The regulator is not making instant payment. A lot of people are throwing stones at Payments Canada. But at the same time, they are not doing their homework. And the day Instant Payments Canada is going to deliver the payment trail, those guys are going to be stuck because they will have planes, they won't have airports.
And that seems like a huge undertaking, the core banking system.
We have a clear example here in the region of this amazing company, League Data, right? You must know Carrie Forbes, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen the work that Carrie had to do to implement Mambu. I mean, now they are at the end of it. But very few companies actually go down this path because it's so long and so expensive.
Yeah.
And so using our approach, you kind of say, okay, I'm going to let my core and my legacy system here for a while more, while delivering what's important, which is an instant customer experience, instant payment on the customer experience side.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's what it comes down to, is delivering that good customer experience, because that's what people expect. Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to talk about you a bit more. No, but it's interesting to hear you reflect on that, because I feel like a lot of industries, that level of change is hard to implement and roll out anywhere. Like, I think healthcare feels that a lot with a lot of their kind of legacy systems, and there's just so many intricacies and people involved that it's really hard to, as much as there's so many pain points, it's really hard to actually implement that level of change. So,
and when there's so many companies like trying to innovate, right, coming up with these solutions, but maybe it's just systems stuck in their ways and trying to help bring them up to where everyone expects them to be.
There's a huge program going right now. It's called One Health or something like that.
Yeah, they're working on it.
I'm following that. I'm trying to follow that quickly, because from a tech perspective, I find this super interesting. Like, how do you get out of the conundrum of that's just a reality? You use some tech, and like 2 years ago, two years down the road, it's like it's a legacy. How do you deal with that? And there is so much talk about strategy and blah blah. And the real point is, the ego is so big in so many boardrooms. We know that, like people in boardrooms, that a lot of time the ego goes in front of the what's good for the customers, what's good for the people, and you end up with huge legacies and no plan to get away from it. So
Yeah, totally. Very interesting. But I do actually want to talk more about you. That is interesting. Because you are a very active member of Digital Nova Scotia. You personally give back through our program Champions Initiative, which involves mentoring, supporting our Skills for Higher Atlantic students. So thank you for that. So I wanted to kind of ask you, why is community involvement and mentorship so important for you, and how does that align with your company's values and goals?
So it's really something I've always done. I think it's super important to teach youngsters. Maybe because when I was a youngster, I didn't have so many great mentors. It took a while to happen. In Brazil, I actually created a program which is called Smart Code. We train people from the favelas, so really low income, black women to code and everything. So I've been involved with that for a while now on the personal side. And yeah, I think it's not only about the content of what you learn. Like when you find a good mentor, it's also about the behavior, about making the link between your professional and your personal life. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes we have to face things that, as person, we don't want to face. So it's also challenging. Sometimes you try to, open the eyes of people and they don't really want to. But I really think it's important. So, and 1 year ago, me and my wife, my kids, we decided to live here. So that's why I'm trying to make a difference now. And it's completely aligned with Matera values. I won't give you the exact phrases of the
Mission,
values.
vision, values.
But it's and they actually have there are people who are who come from the public education, which in Brazil it's harder because after the dictatorships in the 80s, what they do, they destroy education, right? So Brazil is still recovering from that. And you have a very good public education, but for very few people. Most of the system is still broken. So the guys at Matera, the founders, they very early on they created the foundation Matera. They do a lot of work to create. Of course, at the company you could say, hey, tech companies, they already like talent. But no, it's not a foundation Matera is not only about forming people to go work at Matera. So I see that as a selfless effort and a way for them to say, hey, we were part of the public system, and we know it's a public system that has a lot of problems, so let's try and give back. I see myself as a teacher in a few years, so let's see.
Okay. We'll reflect on this podcast.
I love that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you again.
Well, that's it for our questions. You made it through. So now the floor is yours. Is there anything new and exciting that you would like to share?
Well, we've talked a lot about instant payments, but I'm truly excited to be part of the discussions. And when I say be part, I'm just listening, really, and sometimes trying to contribute when I'm asked to. But with the open banking discussions here in Canada, I think we have an incredible advocate in the country, and we are super lucky because he's from here, Senator Colin Deacon, right, from the region, and I think we need more people like him to keep pushing. I've seen this film before. Again, I've seen all the coffee discussion becoming associations discussions, and then we and it happened in Brazil. And so I'm so happy to see this film again. It's a different movie because the culture is different, It's not only about the subtitles and changing the language, but I'm truly, and especially because Canada has such a large immigration population, and I mean, I'm lucky. I'm a person who has means, but even as a new immigrant, I mean, it's been 1 year I'm here. Credit score is a piece of crap, excuse my French. And
your French, you can say.
And and so I imagine for a lot of people who arrive in this country with limited resource, I mean, it's just so tough on them. So a lot of people say, hey, we don't have unbanked people here and whatnot, but we do have a very large immigration population that would benefit a lot from those changes in the financial services industry. So I'm really excited to see this happening. I've seen great projects from the region, from the province, in this sense, created by Nigerian people and whatnot. And so I'm really excited to see this happening.
Well, you'll be keeping a close eye on it. So will we. It'll be exciting to see it all play out.
Yeah. Merci.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great. I learned a lot.
Yeah, same.
This was really informative, just for business, but also like kind of personal life. And so thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Recorded by This Is Marketing, unblanding branding since 2015.